Second, the fine-tuning argument. Okay, so in order to understand what the fine-tuning argument is, you have to understand what what fine-tuning is. Does that make sense? You have to understand that, right? You have to understand the term, right? So what is fine-tuning? And I'll give a very technical definition that two brilliant people have stated. But I want to emphasize that there's going to be an example that illustrates what fine-tuning is, okay? So please hang on tight. So fine-tuning, these two gentlemen say, these two handsome gentlemen say, fine-tuning refers to the contrast between a wide range of possibilities and a narrow range of a particular outcome or phenomenon. That didn't make sense, right? So what does that mean, right? So they give an analogy. And if you want to see the credentials, you can see it there. But they give an analogy. So, man, let's say you are making a beautiful cake, and it has even sparkles on it. So to get a very beautiful cake, you need highly specific ingredients, right? And even with these ingredients, you need the exact amount of ingredients. Does this make sense? Okay, so you need each individual ingredient, but not only that, you need each individual ingredient needs to be the specific amount, right? So, and also, it's not only that, right? It's also the perfect combination of all of these ingredients that you get a very beautiful cake, okay? So let's say that you tripled the amount of flour, right? What if you tripled the amount of flour that you put on the cake? It's no longer beautiful. There's no more sparkles on it, right? So it would be a failed cake now. And I know the suggestion that I should put flour on there, but I couldn't find that image, but that's for another time. But it would be a failed cake, right? Does this make sense? Because it needs to be the specific amount of each ingredient, and it needs to be all combined into a particular goal, right? To produce a very delicious and beautiful cake. So, this cake is a great example of fine-tuning. If we say it a different way, the way that we can recognize the cake is finely tuned is because, number one, it is contingent. And what does that mean, right? What does that mean? Contingency just means that it didn't have to be that way. It could have been something else. It wasn't necessary that this was the only possible option. Does this make sense? So it has to be, number one, contingent. Secondly, it must be complex. Each individual ingredient of the cake is very complex, right? And it's not just the individual ingredients, it's the specific amount of each ingredient. Further, it must be specific. You must have a specific buildup or a specific purpose for its existence. In this case, the cake is delicious and it makes us happy, I guess. But this is how we can recognize fine-tuning in the universe. Anywhere, any example, like a chair or a speaker or a particularly shaped snow, like a snowman or something. This is how we recognize fine-tuning in the universe. That's something, an agent has intervened and created something, right? Case in point, another example, a watch. And this is the famous traditional example of fine-tuning. It was by William Paley. He's an Anglican philosopher. And he argued that why can you know that a watch is finely tuned, right? A watch. Why is it finely tuned? Because let's say you are walking through the forest, okay? You're walking through the forest and you see a rock. You don't think much of the rock, right? It's just a rock. And you don't automatically assume that it is finely tuned. But let's say you're walking through the forest and you see a watch on the ground, okay? You would immediately think that someone dropped the watch, or I don't know, someone left it there. In other words, someone has finely tuned this watch. Why? Why can you recognize this? Because number one, the watch didn't have to be that watch, right? It's contingent upon an agent doing something to make this kind of watch, right? Further, it's very complex. You need each individual gear matching up in the perfect way in order to, turn the dial. It has the stop button too. So it's very complex. It cannot happen naturally in nature. So further, it has to be specific. It is very specific. It has a highly specified goal or purpose for its existence. Does this make sense? So the way you can recognize fine-tuning is, number one, that it is contingent, or it didn't have to be that way. Excuse me. Second, it's very complex. It is highly intricate in its design. Third, it is very specific. It has a specific goal and a specific build-up for its existence. Okay? So this is how you recognize fine-tuning anywhere in the universe. Whether you see, again, like a particularly shaped rock or a snow or chairs or pianos and stuff. So number one, it is contingent, complex, and specific. Okay? In the same way, the fundamental forces of the universe, life itself, and all of the things that allow for life, like energy, usable energy, or chemistry, these are all highly specific and complex laws of the universe. And you'll see this through the video. And they are all so finely tuned to a narrow life-permitting range that it is not explainable by other means, okay? So what I mean by this is, let's go to a video. Let's go macrocosmic and look at a few examples within this video. Fine-tuning. Hopefully that'll play. Yes, it will play. Hallelujah. Okay.
razor's edge.
Okay, so as you've seen in the video, all these constant quantities, and he only gave 3 examples, right? But there is dozens upon dozens more, right? As you go on to the video, there's even more examples, okay? So you can watch the video in its entirety if you want. But this is not just the ramblings of Christians who took over science or something. It goes across all spectrums, whether it be atheist, agnostic, Buddhist, Muslim, or even Christian, obviously, right? Everyone, all the physicists recognize that the universe is finely tuned. As Stephen Hawking states, the odds against a universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous. The fine-tuning of the universe is like the appearance of a well-ordered library in which thousands upon thousands of encyclopedias are scattered about randomly, but somehow being in perfect order, and all of them being perfectly aligned in the right way, even though there's no apparent cause for that order. Also, 2 other brilliant physicists, and these are the 2 gentlemen that you saw earlier, those 2 guys down here, right? You saw them, Geraint Lewis and Luke Barnes. They say small changes in the free parameters of the laws of nature as we know them have dramatic, uncompensated, and detrimental effects on the ability of the universe to support the complexity needed for physical life forms. And this book is actually a great book illustrating this. There are 2 brilliant physicists from, I think, Sydney University, and they hold a class there. I couldn't understand major portions of the book because it goes very deep. It goes into like all the different ways the universe could have been, like an atom could have weighed a little more, or and ceasing to permit a life permitting universe. And they go into like matter and like even space-time. They go into biology. They go into all these examples and show that it is the scientific consensus that we live in a finely tuned universe. Okay, and another well-known and brilliant physicist, Freeman Dyson, states, "The more I examine the universe and study the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe, in some sense, must have known we were coming." So, what could explain this fascinating fact of fine-tuning? Okay? Well, there's 3 options. Number 1, it's called physical necessity by another name. But was this universe necessary? Did all the numbers have to be that way? Was there no other possible combination or explanation for the universe being this very way? Did it have to be that way? Was there no other option? Okay, so that's the first option. Secondly, did we just get really, 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 really lucky? So it's chance, right? It's basically stating that we won the cosmic lottery. And remember that just like the cake example, it's specified complexity, right? So what I mean by that, again, is each individual ingredient needs to be an exact amount, okay? And each of them have to fit together in a perfect way in order to allow for a life-permitting universe, right? Just like the cake. Think of the cake when I mean by a specified complexity. Third, are we here by design? Was there someone or something that was rigging the odds in a certain way that allowed for a incomprehensibly improbable chance that we are here in this life-permitting universe? So 3 options, right? Physical necessity, chance, or design. Let's take a look at the first one. Was this universe necessary? According to this view, the constants have to be what they are now. Okay? This view states that all the constants and quantities could not have been any other way. It had to be this way. There was no other option. There was no possible universe in which there could not have been a life-permitting universe. Does this make sense? So that's the first option. Problem. There is no evidence to support this. There's nothing in physics to show that the universe had to be this way. In fact, the book that was here, The Fortunate Universe, goes into dozens upon dozens of examples. The universe could have been different. Okay? So there's nothing to show that the universe had to be what they are now. What it is now, sorry. What it is now. So physical necessity is not plausible. Or how about chance? How about chance? According to this view, all of the constants and quantities fall into the infinitesimal life-permitting range, and we basically lucked out. We lucked out in this universe. In this view, we had basically won the cosmic lottery. Okay, so we got really, really lucky. But we can show that this is unreasonable by way of an analogy. So let's say you're playing a game of poker with one other person. And say you bet like a $10,000 on the line to raise the stakes a little bit. Okay? And let's say you get a very bad hand, but he gets a royal flush. And to those who don't play poker, a royal flush is like the highest thing that you can get, right? There's all these different sets, like a full house, I think, a pair, or three of a kind, or something like that. But the royal flush basically beats any other set of cards. So it's the ultimate trump card. So say he gets this. In context, the odds of getting the royal flush is 1 in 650,000. Okay? So it's very unlikely. And even those who have played poker, I'm not sure if you have gotten a royal flush ever. So it's very unlikely that you get this, right? But you convince yourself that this guy's not cheating, okay? You convince yourself that because this hand you're just as likely to get this hand rather than this hand, you just convince yourself and say that this guy's not cheating. Does that make sense? Because this hand is actually also 1 in 650,000. Does that make sense? Both are 1 in 650,000, right? Both have the highly improbable nature. Okay? But what happens if he gets another royal flush? Now it's getting suspicious. 2 times in a row, right? What are the chances of him getting a royal flush 2 times in a row, the highest trump card, right? So something's awry. But although you start to suspect something, you're willing to keep on playing. But despite the odds, if he gets it again and again and again and again and again, you would be firmly convinced that this guy is now cheating, right? It's actually reasonable to infer that this guy is cheating. Does that make sense? It's not just a unreasonable hypothesis, right? This is actually the reasonable hypothesis that this guy is cheating. He's rigging the odds in a certain way to ensure that his hand gets the best hand, right? The royal flush. Does everybody understand what I'm trying to say here? Yes. Okay, great. So, and if he gets it again and again, he steals all your money. So now you'll be ready to attack him. You'll be leaping upon him or shooting him. I don't know. But I love this photo. It really illustrates what you would try to do if he stole all your money. But why? Right? We ask the question, why? Why? Why do you suspect him of cheating? Why is it reasonable to conclude that the man has cheated? Or shall we say, fine-tuned his hand? Why? Why? Is there any thoughts?
Because it's most likely by design.
Right. Yeah, that is the most reasonable hypothesis, right?
What they say?
It is the most likely, what did you say, probability or something?
It's most likely that it's by design.
Right, it's most likely by design. That's what he said. Yes. Right. Just like the cake, right, that's exactly right? It's most likely by design. He has fine-tuned his hand. Just like the cake, it is specified complexity. Does that make sense? It's not just complex, it is specific because he has gotten this again and again. And in context in poker, that is the highest cards that you can get, right? So it's because it's an instance of specified complexity, that is why we can say that he has fine-tuned his hand. That would be the most reasonable explanation, given all the different odds. So the analogy is this. If something happens with specified complexity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, or it's contingent, right? A contingent. Or it wasn't necessary that it was that way. Does that make sense? If it is contingent, then the reasonable inference is to wonder if there is intentional fine-tuning or intelligence rigging the odds in a certain way to ensure that he gets the best of the best. Does that make sense? That is actually a reasonable inference. So, again, an instance of specified complexity, the reasonable inference is to think that there is intentional fine-tuning of the odds. That makes sense, right? You start to wonder if it's just coincidence or destiny. It had to be that way. But compared to the royal flush, getting the royal flush 5 times, the chances of the universe being life-permitting is tremendously more improbable than getting a royal flush 5 times. Remember, it's like 10 to the 80th power. And it's not just that, it's multiple of those. And one of the constants that you saw was, I think it was like the mass of the proton, or mass and energy of the proton. That is like 10 to the power of 123. And that is a number that all of our supercomputers in the world cannot input that number in its databases. It's that big of a number. And it's not just that one instance, right? It is all these different numbers that had to exactly match, but not only, just like the cake, right? It's not just these individual ingredients. It's obviously the individual ingredients are itself complex, but it is the perfect combination of all of these ingredients too that makes a cake, right? You remember the cake example, right? Yes. So the chances of the universe being life-permitting is tremendously more improbable. So therefore, just like the inference of the royal flush example, the logical inference is to believe that chance is not at all plausible. It would be akin to getting the royal flush like, I don't know the exact numbers, but like 250 times in a row, and you would still believe that's chance. No one would infer that, right? No one would believe that. So we move on to the only possible option, design. The intricate design at the very foundations of our universe point to an intelligent designer, a super intellect. So given the fine-tuned nature of the universe, we infer a fine-tuner. That is the reasonable inference, right? Just like the royal flush. Does this make sense? It's not just like Christians taking over science, or deists taking over science and using that for their own desert-dwelling theology or something. That is actually the reasonable inference. That makes sense, right? Yes. Okay, great. So this is the fine-tuning argument. And this is the second argument for God's existence that we will cover today.